Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Great Debate. We'll give it a couple of minutes while people log in, and we'll kick off at 11:03 just to give people some time to come in and find their seats and get themselves ready to go. Just give it one more minute for people to join. Okay, let's get the show on the road. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Great Debate on Trust and Transparency. Thank you very much for joining me this morning. My name is Ryan Martin, and I'm the head of marketing solutions for TikTok. So today, I'm delighted to be putting on my IAB Europe hat as the chair of the Brand Advertising Committee, and I'm really pleased to welcome you all here this morning. As part of my role as chair, we'll be working with the committee to produce some amazing educational outputs focused on brand advertising. And I have the absolute honour, privilege of hosting brilliant events like this to discuss and debate some of the most important topics in the industry. This is the third year that we've been running this event. We wanted to look at the key areas of the digital advertising industry and see how we can build trust and transparency into the DNA of our industry. As you know, trust and transparency are so important, ever more so. And we always love to host this event and look forward to having some really interesting discussions with you. We're hosting this event live, so you, the audience, you can ask questions in real time and share your thoughts on what's being discussed. It does mean that we have people in office. We've run a few of these during lockdown when people are at home, but now people are in office, so there might be fire alarms and things like that we've got to contend with, but we're here, we're live. So please do share your questions with us and we'll look to respond as best we can. We'll be recording the event, so we'll share the videos with you as a follow-up next week. So if you do have to pop off or miss anything, don't worry, you will be able to catch up. So I'm pleased to say that we've got a stellar lineup of speakers and moderators and panelists in our session. So let's take a quick look at the agenda of what we've got for you today. First up, our focus will be on sustainability and how we can use transparency to build trust throughout the supply chain. The panel will talk about how sustainability is being included in media buys, providing key insight on what we can expect from advertisers, partners, and publishers. After this, we'll be looking at how trust can be instilled in the future innovations in advertising growth areas like AI and retail media. We're delighted to have industry experts come together to share their views on how trust is being built with their key stakeholders and policymakers, as well as what the industry is doing through key schemes like the IAB Gold Standard. And then finally, we'll close the session with a panel of industry heavyweights to discuss the current status of brand safety. Following the results of IAB Europe's annual brand safety poll, the panel will talk through their best practices, predictions, and brand safety within our ecosystem. So we're very grateful to all our experts for taking their time out of their busy schedules to be here today and share their knowledge and expertise with us. Every speaker is, of course, a member of the IAB Europe. So if you'd like more information on how you can get involved with any future activities, please do contact myself or our CMO, Helen Massard, for further details. As I've said, you can actively participate in today's event, as each panel will be followed by an audience Q&A. So if you have questions for today's panelists, please submit them in the Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom window. Now then, let's get things started. So on to our first session, where I'm delighted to introduce Nikki Spooner, the Senior Director of Agency and Brand Partnerships at PubMatic EMEA, who will be moderating this session Welcome, Nikki, and over to you to introduce your panelists.
Thanks, Ryan, and hi, everyone. Great to see you joining us today. I'm thrilled to be moderating this panel around transparency and sustainability. So without further ado, I would like to welcome my panelists to join. We have Luca, Stefan, and Joe. I'm going to start with you, Luca. Would you mind introducing yourself and talking a bit about why transparency in the area of sustainability is so important to you in your day-to-day role and the company that you work in?
Absolutely. Hi, Nikki. By the way, my camera's not working for some reason, so I'm not sure why.
It's fine.
Okay, great. That's fine. That works for me. So I'm Luca. Hi, everyone. Oh, sorry. Here we go. I think you should be able to see me now, hopefully. I'm Luca. I work at Microsoft on the Invest DSP business, and I look after brand partnerships in Northern Europe. I'm also chair on our internal sustainability committee at Microsoft, so it's definitely sort of a passion point for me. And I guess that why sustainability is such a big deal here is that I guess transparent supply chains are really the only way that we can understand our true impact on the environment. I think we're only really just starting to beginning to scratch the surface, understand exactly what the impact is on the environment from our industry. I think one stat that sort of just jumped out at me from some paper that I read recently is that serving 1,000 impressions is the equivalent of one washing machine load in terms of CO2. So that's sort of really piqued my interest, and since then I've been heavily involved. And then just as a company in general, Microsoft has a few pretty big pledges. 2030, we want to be carbon negative, and by 2050, we actually want to remove all the historical carbon emissions that we've emitted as a company ever. So that's essentially why I'm here.
Thank you. Stefan?
Hi all, great to be here. Thanks for the invitation. On the one hand side, I'm a sustainability lead for the Sim1 Entertainment Group, which is the advertising and media part of the ProSiebenSat.1 Group in Germany. The main fields of sustainability work there is around green production, as we're also a big TV producer, optimization of ad tech and media deliveries, ensuring transparency and comparability with CO2 numbers, but also with social impact and our publishing quality we are giving to the market. On the other hand side, I'm since the beginning of this year elected vice chair of the IAB Europe Sustainability Standards Committee. As the name of the committee suggests, we are developing their standards in the highly dynamic sustainability world, as we are seeing many regulations from the EU side and the big pressure also from Mother Nature. So there's a lot of needs we have to address, and in the committee we are facing this for and with as much parts of the industry we can get into the discussion.
Fabulous, thank you. And Joe?
Thanks, Nikki, and thanks for the opportunity to be here. I'm Joe. I work for GroupM Nexus in our global accounts team. So I work with the GroupM agency and global advertisers building basically global programmatic strategy. Obviously, as part of that, we've become aware of the impact of big global programmatic executions on the environment. So it's a big topic now that we're speaking to obviously advertisers about how we can help mitigate and address this. I think I was thinking about what this means for my day-to-day, and I think it's quite probably before to address that as kind of what does sustainability almost mean, I guess, to me at a personal level. And I've found, as we've been talking a lot more about it probably over the past year, that immediate thought when you start to talk about sustainability is this just a tack on, to something else? And I've definitely found there's a bit of, every time you talk about it, that you get that response a bit from people, and you're just adding this on because you think it can help you sell something, or it's a nice little hook. And I really think for me sustainability is breaking that dynamic. Everything we do in our day-to-day in business produces stuff, right? reduces emissions, growth is linked to emissions. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive. So, you know, for me, in terms of what I do on my day-to-day about helping global advertisers buy ads, for me, it really means how can we help them buy fewer, better ads, and addressing that macro piece, I think is key for us to addressing this challenge.
Absolutely. And I think actually that segues quite nicely into the next question. I might pass over to you first for that, actually, Joe, because I think given the experience, the breadth of experience on this panel alone, the different vantage points that you have in this kind of digital chain of events, as you say, to driving advertising campaigns and growth for businesses, there's a lot being talked about, but are we seeing the importance and the learnings in this area actually translating into RFPs from businesses that you're working with? And what's that look like from your point of view, Joe?
Yeah, I think when Luca mentioned, I think we're still in very early days. Every client is asking, how can I buy more sustainably? I guess the question is then, how do you do that? There's obviously advancements, I think, in technology measurement and data around being able to better measure the carbon impact of running advertising. I think we need to be careful not to talk about reducing wastage yet by using those data sets. It's more, for me, measurement, understanding. Can we start to think about baselines? I think in saying that, where we're trying to focus then is maybe a shift away from how we've conceived performance about maximizing volume in media and understanding, well, what is the optimal level of media to deliver on a set outcome. Doing a lot of work around understanding the relation between how many impressions or what's a baseline level impression to deliver a completed view, for instance, and then using that to index how we buy. I'd say that's not going far enough, because there's a question about, well, is a view actually, how valuable is a view? So I do see a bit of a convergence here with some new measurement around attention and being able to understand the qualitative impact of an ad placement through attention, and then potentially being able to better model that to, I would say, better outcomes around awareness or sales that actually matter to a brand, and then modeling that against carbon. So I think we've got a long way to go. I think if people are asking the right questions, it is a real learning journey. We need more data, we need more measurement, and I do think we need a bit of a shift in mindset about how we prioritize media buying.
Absolutely. And I like what you said about measurement, but it sounds like from your kind of seat, you're starting to see this research happening and you're starting to see inquiries coming through. But from your side, Luca, what are you witnessing? What's happening with the campaigns and the RFPs that you're seeing?
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of what Joe just said definitely rings true. I think there's a fairly inconsistent approach to sustainability just as a priority from a lot of our buyers. So I work on the DSP side, I get a lot of brand RFPs. On some of the RFPs, you'll have a sentence which is essentially feels like a tick box. And on some, there's been a clear thought process behind a whole paragraph or a set of questions asking about measurement and what you can provide. So definitely like disparate ways of dealing with it from the brand side. But in terms of what we can actually do today, I think, again, echoing what Joe said, I think integrating with some of the, I guess, sustainability tech or SUS tech, I'm not sure if that's a thing, maybe it will be, with some of the green vendors to basically activate just green segments and target domains that have been rated as climate friendly is one thing you can start to do, maybe on our platform, and I think on quite a few others. And I think we take active steps to integrate some of the
I think we might be losing Luca a little bit there. Okay, in that case, I'll pass over to you, Stefan. Is there anything that you would add to that kind of question?
Yeah, sure. We are seeing lots of impact and pressure now from the supply chain is coming more and more in. We on publisher side, we have, of course, many ratings and questionnaires. For example, from the Group M, there's the Vendor Explorer, or the IPG Media Responsibility Guide. There are new players from directly out of the industry, like Scope 3 or Impact Plus, bringing in new measurements and opportunities for advertisers to get an idea of transparency or a better idea. We are also seeing players from the wider environmental field, for example, CDP or EcoVadis at the end also, SBTi, which are coming closer to the industry and getting their stake of the supply chain. And at the end, also financial players from the financial reporting side, like ISS, ESG, or Sustainalytics, which are getting more and more included by also advertisers or agencies in the evaluation of the media market. The end of the story will be somehow ESG will be one KPI. So from my perspective, definitely one KPI for media delivery.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can imagine that you're probably right on that. Sorry, Luca, we lost you a little bit there, but I'll come back to you actually to get your thoughts on what you're seeing in terms of practice among publishers. And if you would call out any work from any particular publishers where you think, you know, there's some really good impact happening.
Absolutely. I think there's just from the publisher, there's definitely been increasing interest in or just openness in working with sustainable tech vendors and green vendors. I think that to get sort of baseline measure of performance and actual emissions on the publisher side is something new. And again, like varying interest, but on the whole, we're trending upwards. One way I think that we've seen some of our publishers' work is essentially decreasing the number of SSPs that they're working with. So it's essentially consolidating to reduce duplication, to basically like declutter the supply chain, because that's what's causing these emissions. And I think that consolidation is good from an environmental perspective, but again, I think DeFi and sustainability, it's not just environmental, it's also economic, it's also social. And I think that sort of duplication, the reason it's there is because it's good for publishers, right? It's financially there's an incentive to doing that. And also I think this consolidation, we've got to be careful with consolidating onto largely like bigger publishers, and that could potentially pose a risk to maybe smaller, more nimble publishers. There's D&I aspects there that we need to take into consideration. So there are some of the things that we're doing, but I guess just more of a rounded approach to sustainability is also needed.
Absolutely. And I think you were mentioning that in our kind of pre-session chat, weren't you, Stefan, about the ESG, not just being about the E, but also there's a focus to be put on maybe the other letters there.
And most of the time we're discussing actually in the media market sustainability is focused on ecological part and CO2 reduction, carbon reduction, which is totally fair. Nevertheless, you all know in the internet there are also social impact is interacting with at the end ecological impact. For the best example, I think is always the MFAs, or the made for advertising pages, which are which we see really bad performing regarding ecological efficiency. And furthermore, they are somehow intransparent in the long tail somewhere, and probably also one of the main drivers of disinformation and social complications at the end. So from the publishing side, this is something we see probably, also as a good part for the industry. That this kind of challenges are becoming under sustainability spotlights a new twist and a more important role. And at the end, you mentioned, I think, Luca, also tech providers to take Scope 3. They just delivered a few weeks ago, a month already, their findings that if you exclude ecological inefficient pages, you will have at the end a more efficient, you will find a more efficient and effective surrounding for your media campaigns.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot to think about in everything that you said, and you know, your view, as I say, you're viewing from different seats in this chain of events almost. But I suppose that's where this next question is so interesting, because with so much to consider and so many moving parts involved, where does the responsibility ultimately sit when it comes to driving change here, when it comes to actual action and also the transparency around that? So I'm going to go to you again, Stefan, to start.
Sure. I think regarding sustainability, we are all responsible. It's easy to point to others, to advertisers or to publishers, as we are the most closest to the consumer. But nevertheless, at the end, if everyone is doing their own homework and is going to drive transparency regarding their own responsibility, and there's no need for finger pointing. So I think the most easiest way would be, and the way with not that many estimations as we have in the market right now in this case, would be if everyone is taking care of their own stake. It's called Scope 1 and 2 regarding the greenhouse gas emissions. So the Scope 3 is the part which is beside your own really capable responsibility in your company, and the upstream and the downstream parts you have in the moment. You have to estimate them in the moment. And this is fair and good to get a better understanding of the whole market. But the best way at the end is always regarding sustainability. Start on your own side and then extend your scope step by step.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, I can see you nodding. Would you agree with Stefan on that, or is there anything you'd add to it?
Yeah, no, I echo massively what Stefan just said. I think if we're all honest, the ad ecosystem, so all those little layers that we're talking about, is probably in a bit of an unhealthy state. So I think probably the best course of action is to look at initially, where you sit within that chain, what's your impact, can you address it, and then being a lot more collaborative with how you work across different stakeholders. I think especially around, if you think about programmatic, the fragmentation of that marketplace across both demand and supply, ability to understand and measure ad effectiveness, which obviously links to carbon as well. So I think starting to think, I think as Stefan said, how can you fix your impact, and then taking a more collaborative approach, I think, to other stakeholders, because ultimately this is bigger than business. We're not going to be sell, if we don't fix this, we're not going to be able to sell anything to anybody in 30 years potentially. I know that's probably a bit drastic, but this is something for us to sell together and be a lot more collaborative rather than finger pointing.
Yeah, like what you said there about thinking about the impact you can have in the space that you're sat in, and then looking around you to see where there are collaboration opportunities for sure. From your point of view, Luca, is that something that you're seeing already? Is that something that you think is true?
Yeah, and I think actually I guess because we're in a fairly unique position and sitting across the whole ecosystem, we've got the buy side, the sell side, we get that like overall view of the supply chain. And I think because that supply chain is the real issue and everyone is in that supply chain, I totally agree with both panelists that it's on everyone. And I think we've seen from industry articles that I've been reading that like 60% of the emissions come from the actual like ad selection on the publisher side, so actually the inserting of the ad. But then again, the brand is the ultimate gatekeeper of budget. That's the only money in the programmatic supply chain. So actually, in terms of leverage, the brand could potentially put pressure on where that budget is going and how it's being spent. But then equally in the middle, you got I guess agencies and platforms that I think have the duty to both educate and implement on this stuff. I think from a buying platform perspective, I think some of the points that I didn't cover earlier because of my connection, apologies, but that slot in quite nicely here is that some of the quick wins that you could do from just the buying platform are things like what Stefan mentioned around MFA blocking, so made for advertising sites that are just those horrible like sort of spammy pages with a million ads. And those are not only awful for user experience, the emissions on average from those pages are 13% higher. They're just pretty bad all around. So I think cutting those out is a really quick and easy win. Other things you can do from a buying perspective is sort of creative purging from platforms, removing inefficient partners from supply chains, and just, I guess, even more advanced to this, the responsibility is everyone, but on the buy side, you can also do things like curation, and some of the things that you can do with curating your own essentially green marketplace are super interesting. I think in a few years, I think that will be where the industry goes towards, but curating green marketplaces and green inventory packaged up in a completely transparent system where transparency is core, being able to basically police that supply chain, I think is the future of where we're going, hopefully.
Yeah, I like some of the examples that you raised there, actually, because there are so many different levers that can be pulled to, as you mentioned, make quick wins really and have an impact immediately. But given the seat that you're sat in, Joe, and all of the stakeholders you have to manage and all the levers that you've got to pull, when you're building out partnerships with your clients and working with your agencies, for example, what are some of the kind of good tangible examples like Luca's just surfaced that you can mention for the audience today?
Yeah, well, I think and it links into a lot of what Stefan and Luca were saying probably a few minutes ago. I think from Group M standpoint, obviously a big impact in terms of buying media in globally, and it is taking, I'd say, holistic response to what is responsible content and being able to reward, I think, publishers. I know Luca made a point, a lot of the back end setups around ad calling is to help them monetize their media. So how can we as a buyer actually incentivize publishers who are doing the right thing around cleaning out the supply chain, cutting out made for advertising websites, not spreading disinformation about stuff like sustainability? How do we ensure we're still rewarding minority-owned publishers within that, and creating a framework around responsible journalism? I think that is something that Group M, from an investment standpoint, is building out that framework so we can help reward the publishers who are doing the right thing, and hopefully that will help create a better ecosystem on the supply side. I think in terms of, I guess, day-to-day role around buying programmatic, it is looking at the things that sit within our supply chain around SBO, for instance. I know we work with Unique and PubMatic around how can we create packages around pre-auction packages for low emission placements, making sure we can get APIs into companies like Scope 3 so we can actually start to measure and baseline, working with creative technologies that can downweight the file size of ads. I think the other thing that we can probably do, I think, thinking about what Luca was saying, from a measurement or KPI standpoint, I think we've probably got a responsibility to the agency side to not accept bad briefs. Thinking about clicks as a metric, for instance, which I think we've all known for probably about 10 years. There's questions about the quality. There's how that opens out into kind of fraudulent bots, everything else that everybody knows about. We should be braver to push back on those briefs and actually put in better measurement that again rewards publishers who are delivering better high impact kind of placements, which should also deliver better performance, maybe at a higher cost, and have lower emissions. So yeah, a lot of different things that are probably some are more macro and some are more the technical level, but I think you do need to look at kind of both scales, I think, to address the challenge.
Just tagging onto that point as well, I think that some of the initial research from some of these like big green vendors suggests that actually cutting out stuff like MFA actually is rewarded by not only lower emissions but actually better performance, and on the publisher side as well, it's leading to increasing revenue in some cases. So I think an education piece around that is also of worth, because I definitely didn't know that about 2 months ago. So
yeah, I think I think Scope 3 and maybe Lumen or Playground echoes that around that correlation between attention, which automatically kind of cuts out bad placements in MFA, better performance, lower emissions. So that, I think, education piece around quality, I think is a really easy win, I think.
I would absolutely agree, and I'd again, some really good examples of the work that's coming out of the group there, Joe. And from what you've said, it's almost, it's not made easy, but I think it sounds as though there's good rigor around the measurement, the benchmarking, a framework almost for teams to be thinking about when they're working with the different partners that they are. So that leads me to the next question, I suppose, which is, as we look ahead, could actually the implementation of standardized policies benefit the industry in accelerating the agenda here? Do we think it would be helpful? I'm going to go to you first, Stefan, to comment.
Yeah, thank you. As Vice Chair of the Sustainability Standards Committee, I'd say yes, definitely. Nevertheless, I want to add to Joe and Luca, it isn't that easy. We have one of the working groups in the committees called Methodology and Frameworks, and there we are doing actually a gap analysis as we see the need of a comparability in the market between the different ideas of frameworks or methodologies or so-called calculators. I'd say they are estimators, because it's not sometimes it's not every part of the supply chain included, and it is not necessary that every estimator includes every part of the supply chain. Nevertheless, everyone in the supply chain needs an idea which is included and which part is not included, as if you're cutting out pieces of the supply chain, you'll see not that good comparability. So we have some low-hanging fruits where you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So please take a look at the Guide to Sustainable Media from the IAB Tech Lab in New York, or the Guide to Sustainable Business Decision Making from the committee I'm leading with, or furthermore also from the GARM, from the WFA Guide to Sustainability Media. There you'll find for every part of the industry, I think nowadays, really good low-hanging fruits. Nevertheless, you'll take you are good advised by not taking every number too serious in the moment, as the things are not in detail defined yet. So definitely we need more standards to get more closer to the reality around these numbers circulating actually in the sustainability environment.
Excellent. And Joe, what would you add to Stefan's thoughts?
Yeah, I think, I mean, agree with everything Stefan said. The thing I was thinking about in terms of this, about standardization, is like, what is good when it comes to media? Really thinking about media auditing, procurement. That side of things is still so price driven, and I do feel like without addressing that link between how we audit, I guess, what is good, which is obviously really important, in a way that's a bit more sophisticated than just looking at price, that can bring in other data points that link into sustainability or quality, and how can we kind of connect that together with, then I guess, the changes we are starting to see on the more marketing side, because if we continue having that disconnect, there's always going to be, I guess, a tendency to have to account for low cost. And I know it's not as simple as buying more expensive media is going to address all of this, but we do need to find a more, as I said, nuanced way of measuring and auditing what is considered good media in this landscape together as an industry. Because I do worry if that isn't addressed, then some of the other things we're trying to do are going to be more difficult than they should.
It sounds as though you're both in agreement around the standardization of, as you say, the kind of measurement piece almost. But Luca, how useful would the standardization of those things and beyond be for you in your day-to-day?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that would be a massive help, just in terms of all at a really sort of basic level, all the tech speaking the same language across the supply chain so that you can more actively implement strategies and that sort of thing. But for me as well, what would be super useful is just sort of benchmarking, sort of what Joe was saying around just getting a baseline level, like what actually is our emissions as a platform for this campaign, for this advertiser. Because at the moment, a lot of the challenges in some of the working groups that I'm involved in is we really want to improve things, but we have no way of measuring the improvement uplift at the moment. We're just sort of it's things that we know are better for the environment, but we can't quite quantify it yet. So I think that'll be with standardization, I guess that would then be the next step, and that would be like gold dust really for improvements in programmatic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like what you say about everyone speaking the same language. I think, that absolutely would be really useful.
Just adding to the benchmarks, yeah, I'm totally with you. You'll see behind every estimator, calculator, call it how you want it, there are some literature numbers, and they are somehow different. And we are not talking about a few percentage, sondern there are differences around about 200 to 300% somehow. And if you take your, don't know, whatever, 200 gram per 1,000 ad deliveries of carbon, you take the next literature, then you will go up to 600 grams for 1,000 ad deliveries. And if you're going to scale it up, you will have extreme differences, and this is something we have to bridge. Definitely, we have to get more, and that's what I mean. If we say we have to get closer to the real numbers, and yeah, we need estimations for the moment, definitely on carbon, on corporate side, and also on product side. Nevertheless, the numbers have to be better in the future.
Thank you. We've got 2 minutes, so in one sentence, each of you, what's the one thing you want the audience to take away from our conversation today? So I'm going to kick off with you, Luca.
Cool. I'll be really quick. I think that there's loads of things that you can do straight away, even though potentially we can't measure it precisely today, but we know some of the things like the quick wins that we spoke about earlier are really easily implemented by a lot of people in the supply chain. And actually, transparency is key, and one of the ways to, I guess, police that transparent supply chain is through using strategies like an integrated platform, inventory curation for sort of more future-facing strategies. I think there's loads we can do today, basically.
Thank you. And Joe?
Sorry. Yeah, I think for me, it's can we orientate ourselves to thinking fewer, better ads as a starting point? Great
sentence. And Stefan?
As I mentioned earlier, start on your own side before finger pointing, especially around sustainability, as if you are louder to the outside and compared to the inside, it's somehow called probably greenwashing, and that's nobody. It's nobody around here I know who want to be addressed like this. So start with your own. There are many ways to start, get into the discussion, get a feeling of the differences, and yeah, bring in more people, more heads. It's not just not a unit more. It's a decentralized challenge you'll see if you're going further in your companies, and so you'll need lots of discussions. And yeah, thank you very much for listening today.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Nikki. Such a great conversation. A big thank you to you, Nikki, and also to Joe, Stefan, and of course, Luca, for joining us today. I think it's especially insightful to hear about the current status of sustainability practices within the digital ad buy. And we really appreciate you sharing your expertise on this, and hope the audience has some good takeaways on what we can expect in 2024. Next up, we welcome the second panel of today to discuss building trust and future of innovations. So next up, we have, of course, our moderator, Alexandra Jerry-Baum, who's the VP of Customer Success at Adform. And then we have lovely speaker lineups. We have David Caragliano, the Senior Manager of Government Affairs and Public Policy at Google, Chloe Nichols, the Head of AdTech at IB UK, Cecile Blanc, the Global Head of Growth at GroupM, and Nate Pinkston, the Head of Growth and Retail Media Advertising. So a warm welcome to Alexandra. I'm going to hand it over to you to get the show on the road. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone. Can you see me well and hear me well? I don't think my camera is working.
Yep.
Yeah,
All
it
good,
is.
all
Okay,
good.
perfect, cool. So welcome to our panel, which is called Trust and Transparency for Future Innovations. You presented the guests already, but I'll let them to introduce themselves. On my side, I'm Alexandra Jarry-Bourne. I'm the VP Customer Success for Adform. David, do you want to start introducing yourself?
Sure. Thanks so much, Alexandra. Hi, everyone. I'm David Carigliano. I'm on Google's Government Affairs and Public Policy team, where I support our ads products. And in particular, I'm focused on ad safety issues and really feel privileged to be joining you all today.
Cécile, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely, Chloe. Hello, everybody. My name is Cécile Blanc, and I head up growth for Copilot, which is GroupM's proprietary AI platform to supercharge programmatic media buying for our clients.
Right, Chloe, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Chloe Nichols, Head of Ad Tech at IB UK, very focused on trust and transparency and leading the gold standard certification program.
Thanks. And Nate?
I'm Nate Pinkston. I'm with Microsoft Advertising. I head up growth for our retail media business and specifically focus on how we can bring our new products and innovations to market, including things like AI.
Great. So we can't talk about future innovations without mentioning AI. So David, my first question is going to be for you. What is Google's background history when it comes to AI, and where did the journey start for you guys?
Well, thanks so much for the question. So, of course, at Google, AI is something that we've been working on for a long time. So let me just kind of quickly recap the journey. I guess back in the early 2000s is when we started using machine learning to show suggestions and recommendations and improve the quality of ads. And then I think it was in the 2010s where we really made progress integrating AI across bidding, shopping campaigns, keywords, analytics, and more. And then 2016 was sort of a pivotal moment for us because our CEO, Sundar Pichai, kind of formally declared that Google was an AI-first company. And of course, in 2017, Google invented the transformer and kind of kickstarted the whole LLM revolution. Briefly, I should add, soon after that, in 2018, is when we announced our AI principles, right? So that was after extensive consultation, and those are kind of our principles around how we're going to develop AI, what applications we will deploy, and what we won't do. And so really, AI is woven into everything we do at Google. And this is an area we're super excited about. I think you're going to see really bold innovations coming that are going to make AI more helpful for everybody. But we want to balance that boldness with responsibility, right? And with a multi-stakeholder approach. So our approach at Google really can be summed up as bold, responsible, and together, because that multi-stakeholder element is so important.
Bold and responsibility for AI sounds good. Cécile, you're leading growth for Copilot, which is GroupM's AI platform. So what about you? When was Copilot created, and when did it all start for you?
Yeah, well, it started about 7 years ago, which is where Copilot started being incubated. And GroupM's business is to buy, media in the best possible way for our clients. So our thinking around AI is very pragmatically linked to, can it bring better outcomes for our clients in terms of, return from their media buying? Where Copilot started was, doing bidding optimization for each line item under a campaign. And then the journey was to sort of go beyond that, to do not just bidding optimization, but also budget allocation across each of the lines, so that at any moment throughout the campaign, you know that your next media dollar is going to the place that delivers the best return. And then last year, we launched one level above that, the capability to do bidding optimization and budget allocation, not just across line items, but actually across platforms, which unlocks the next level of unlocks the next pockets of performance. And then the next step beyond that, if we look in a crystal ball in a few months, years time, is to go one level above that again, and include in the future social and search. And like David said, for Google, right, like we also very much balance performance and principle. And from the beginning, we were very much pushing a no black box approach to AI. And actually, Copilot is called Copilot because we strongly believe that a human should be in charge. You know, like our clients entrust their media budgets to their agencies, and it's not, AI is not about letting the keys to an automation platform and losing control. It's absolutely about empowering humans to do their best work for the client. And so for years, Copilot has been investing development and time and a lot of love from our designers and UX people into providing very detailed insights and clear data visualizations about what the AI is doing in the background. How did it find the pockets of performance it found, so that our clients can see it at any point in the campaign and have transparency into what the AI has learned, which they can then, you know, infuse into the rest of the campaign cycle. And then just to finish on our journey and how we think about the place of AI in our great ecosystem, is that for us, it's better performance. Like, again, it's about the clients we serve, but better performance doesn't just mean more. We talked about it in the previous panel about sustainability, and Joe, my colleague, who's in actually the same room as myself right now, because we had a little fire alarm incident, said it best when he said fewer, better. And that's also what Copilot enables, so better quality, working with our clients on a journey towards more sophisticated use cases, moving away from proxy media goals like clicks and closer to actual business goals like attention optimization, like offline sales optimization, and balancing performance and principle. So we can optimize towards more sustainable domains. We can push performance while protecting a minimum level of spend on certain types of media supply, such as local news websites. So it's all about trust that the AI will do its best for the client spend, and transparency into what the AI is learning.
Great. I didn't know the story around Copilot's name, the tech and the human. It's very smart. Nate, do you have any comments on your side regarding Microsoft's approach to AI?
Yeah, very similar to my colleagues here. You know, we came to the market with a partnership with OpenAI. Folks may have heard of ChatGPT that we've helped bring to market. And we've been infusing AI across all of our products, building out how it comes to life in our various product formats across our ecosystem. But I'll certainly echo what they said, and the principles around responsible AI have been infused from the beginning about how we think about what AI should look like in the market, how it can be used. So transparency is absolutely core to that. The other one is accountability that I'll mention. And it's really important to think about how accountability is manifested in what you do, and how the AI is brought to life. And some of the other ones that we think about is fairness and inclusiveness. So as we think about AI and how bias might manifest, that's also something that's really important that we look to monitor. And so, you know, we're bringing AI into many, many products and getting them in the hands of consumers as much as possible. But that's certainly a big part of how we think about and look back at and reflect on how we should do further innovation in AI and look at what it can do to be a great co-pilot partner to helping make you more efficient and empowering people to work more effectively. But it's important to think about also, you know, how that's happening and look at the future potential, what it can do, good and bad.
Of course. Now let's look towards what the industry is doing. Chloe, can you talk to us about how the IAB is building trust and transparency with stakeholders?
Definitely. From our perspective, we know there are a lot of Tech Lab standards in existence which will bring increased transparency to the industry. So, for example, Demand Chain Object, or DChain, has recently been included in the gold standard, which is IAB UK's vehicle for promoting some of the standards in existence to prove and demonstrate how the industry is self-regulating. So in this proposal that we made this year, we wanted to include Demand Chain Object because we know that it provides end-to-end transparency, which is critical in tackling things from scam ads, which especially in the UK is a big concern, as UK's government focus on fraud means that there will be further scrutiny into the work our industry is doing. So being able to prove that we are adhering to best practices and that our members are is critical. But not only that, I think these Tech Lab standards that I mentioned, they offer a solution for a lot of concerns in the supply chain. So bringing it back to AI, and whether it's a deep fake or a creative guideline which has not been watermarked correctly, having that end-to-end transparency where you can effectively work backwards throughout the supply chain to address with the DSP, in most cases, who has served that ad, that there is a concern, whether that's scam ads or something else. We are future-proofing the work we continue to do by ensuring we have the correct foundations in place. We have also built a guide, which is being released soon, which helps connect some of those regulatory concerns to the existing standards, which help tackle them, to empower and enable the whole industry to kind of take advantage of them, use them, and prove that we are using the best practices to tackle some of the concerns which can come with this huge growth, change, and doing so in a way that I think will really set ourselves up to prove there is foundational trust in the industry.
Good, very good news about the introduction of DChain, definitely. And what about you, David? How are you managing trust and transparency with policymakers and the overall ecosystem in regards to AI at Google? And what's the number one question you're being asked?
Yeah, well, first, let me just say it's following on Chloe. It's really great to see us making progress as an industry, as she describes. So kudos. So when I think about our approach here, like stepping back, I think that Google's approach, the way we rolled out Bard, I think is sort of illustrative of our approach. So our strategy there was to really show our work, to be methodical, and to launch that experimental product in a gradual and responsible way. So a rushed approach of a product like that risks backfiring vis-a-vis regulators and maybe even the public, right? Especially in the EU. And so we conducted a lot of outreach to explain how with Bard we were being compliant with existing EU laws like GDPR, our approach to DSA, and providing specific proposals to regulators on how that product might be addressed under the EU AI Act. So we took time to gather feedback, and first opened up Bard to a limited audience back in March, and then not until July launched in the EU. And so similarly, there are a number of super exciting AI-driven ads products that we are beta testing and rolling out in a gradual way. And I think that is really indicative of our approach. Bold, but again, like responsible.
Bold, bold. Cecile, what about you? What's the number one questions that you're being asked on your side?
I like the bold but responsible.
I have a number one question I can get to, but I don't want to monopolize. So Cecile, please go ahead.
Sure. So the number one question. So my role is all about helping our GroupM clients make the most of AI for media buying. So again, very pragmatically, the number one question by far that I get is how will Copilot use my data? Our data. I think there's a a great level of awareness and of the value, but also of the risk associated with data. Hence the responsible part that David was just mentioning. And I have to say, marketers are absolutely right to ask those questions to any tech providers. So we welcome that kind of questions. And the answer from a Copilot perspective is that, again, it's all about trust and transparency. So we have data explanatory documents that we share with clients so that they know exactly what data Copilot will use and how. And it states explicitly, for example, again, very pragmatically, but their log files will be stored separately in our system to other clients. And that's the first layer of reassurance. Another piece is that Copilot never rewrites the rules. So we're part of GroupM and Choreograph, and our teams are embedded throughout the whole campaign cycle. And the whole point of that is that we're there to advise upfront on, let's say, optimum balance of audience targeting, so that it's, yes, a good audience pool, a relevant audience, makes the best use of the data strategy and audience insights gathered by our Choreograph teams, but without being so restrictive that scale and Copilot's ability to learn would be hindered. So once the rules are set, Copilot never rewrites them. We don't touch frequency caps, we don't touch audience targeting, we don't touch supply inclusion lists. We're compatible. We were talking in the previous panel about supply path optimization. We don't touch any of that. Copilot's role is to find better performance within the boundaries, sometimes called golden rules, that were agreed with the clients. And then Copilot is part of WPP. So we adhere to very strict security standards. We're always on top of the data and security charter updates, and we undergo very regular penetration tests, for example. So the question of security of the data and how it's used is a great question, and definitely all marketers should ask that of their tech and AI providers.
Responsibility and protecting the data of your clients. David, sorry, you wanted to add the number one question that you're being asked?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's because I'm on the government affairs and public policy team, but I'm getting a lot of questions about how are you dealing with misinformation and disinformation in the digital age, And it's an important and hard question, right? That goes to brand safety and responsibility, right? And so I want to flag that some really exciting and important developments that will require industry collaboration, and that is efforts at Google and in other companies, to roll out a toolkit to address issues of content provenance. So, metadata, watermarking, which Chloe alluded to earlier, really important tools that require cross-industry solutions. At Google, we recently announced SynthID, so that's a new beta tool for watermarking and identifying AI-generated images. Some of you may have seen a few weeks ago, we also made an announcement that election advertisers need to self-disclose the use of AI in their ads. We think that's really important. Of course, there's a balance to be struck here, right? So should all AI-enhanced ads have some kind of big external-facing label that says, AI-enhanced? Probably not, right? That would lead to label fatigue and wouldn't necessarily be helpful to consumers. And I think we all in our industry have a role to play educating lawmakers and putting in place industry best practices.
Definitely. And before going to retail media in a second, how do you see this evolving in the next 12 months? And what role do you think regulation will play?
Yeah, I mean, looking ahead to the next 12 months, we've got so many elections around the globe. Obviously, I'm from the US, so 2024 looms large. In the EU here, I'm in Brussels right now, we have elections coming up, EU Parliament elections in June, I know it's top of mind for lawmakers here in Brussels. It's driving the EU political ads regulation, which is in trilogues. I think now there is in terms of regulation, there is a regulatory framework right here in the EU for dealing with elections, misinformation, civic discourse, these sorts of things. I'm thinking about the DSA. I'm thinking about the EU Code of Practice on disinformation, the soon emerging political ads regulation. When these are done right, they leave space or even delegate responsibility to industry associations, like IAB, for example, to develop standards for implementation, the technical standards. And so I think it's important for us in the context of the regulation that's coming, in the context to the scrutiny coming from these elections and AI-generated content, that we are advocating to preserve and defend the ads-based business model. And we're urging lawmakers to avoid overly prescriptive solutions and empowering industry to come up with more agile approaches.
Cécile, anything to add to the next 12 months before we go to retail?
Well, what strikes me in everything that Chloe mentioned and David just then is that all of this is not new. We have also problematic as an ecosystem, as an industry, faced these problematics and challenges before, and so it's not new, and we expect technology to continue to evolve towards, favor. The market will always favor trust and transparency, and that's what should drive investment, and certainly that's the case for us, as I said before, and how we position Copilot and how we use our clients' data. And so we talked about getting better, more transparent ways to determine the real value of every impression, so that, again, can have fewer, better ads to have the same impact. And attention metrics is an example of that. Over the past couple of years, we've been able to start buying and optimizing against impressions that drive the highest attention. And that's great. But like any new metric, it needs to be tested, it needs to be validated, we need to agree on benchmarks before it can be more widely adopted. Same for sustainability, again, which was the topic of the previous panel. So we just expect to see that trend continue over the next 12 months, and we certainly intend to play our part.
All right. So yeah, as a second topic regarding future innovations, we're going to talk about retail media. It was a hot topic this year so far. I'm sure it's going to be next year, and it has a lot of power regarding first-party data, engaged audiences. So what's the status here? How can we ensure investments in this space are built around trust and transparency? And what have we learned from other channels that we could apply to retail media? That's a lot of questions into one. Cécile, do you want to go first?
Sure. So yeah, definitely a hot topic. And again, from the specific perspective of Copilot, with the lens of being part of GroupM, very much focused on investing our clients' media budgets in the best possible way. What we've noticed is that there's a concentration on a few platforms. We have Amazon, we have the Walmart DSP, we see lots more ecosystem forming, but it's difficult today to implement a holistic approach to media buying that would unlock the next pocket of performance, because each network operates as a walled garden. So buying and optimization is currently a bit disconnected. What we expect to see and what we're working towards is to leverage clean rooms and advanced modeling to be able to stitch together those ecosystems of retail media and create a more robust picture of performance, so that we can also predict better, do better planning, better optimization. And perhaps from our perspective, the key challenge is to crack consistency in measurement, I think, which is a recurring theme today, and certainly true for retail media, and particularly how we focus on proving and therefore using that idea of incremental performance lift from moving budget from one retail ecosystem to another, and how they add to each other as opposed to perhaps have some sort of overlap in the audiences and the performance. So incrementality is a big focus, and in that domain, Copilot is working on closing the loop, for example, with offline sales. And this is something that we've launched for a few clients now, leveraging NCS data, IRI data, to give marketers full trust that their media dollars are directly correlated with actual business outcomes and sales measured by their preferred provider in a transparent way. So what's great with AI is that if you can measure it, you can optimize to it. So those measurement providers that sometimes were used after the fact can be used during the campaign to get the best out of media investment.
Right, and Nate, you're head of growth and retail at Microsoft. So I'm sure you have lots to say about retail media and trust and transparency.
Yeah, and retail media is a young and evolving, I would say it's on the early parts of its stages of maturity. Just like Cecile mentioned, there is a situation where it's pretty fragmented. There's a lot of, well, there's a concentration of a few large players and then a lot of other players that have gotten into the market because it is a hot topic. It's a great source of new revenue streams for retailers. But I think the key thing to think about with that is retailers are not media companies. And that's really what we're seeing now is retailers are going through an evolution to become true media partners to advertisers. And they've never played that role before. And so that's really, I think, the focus of how we're going to see retail media evolve is they need to become more like media businesses. They'll over time, just by virtue, I think, of the push from industry and advertisers, start to adhere to more standards, have that transparency, provide more ability to look and compare across platforms. I think groups like IAB Europe are really leading the way there. They've just released their Retail Media 101 guide. And so that's a great start to look at how the industry can set standards and really push for how advertisers and retailers should be working together. Because if you don't have standards, what happens is, of course, every retailer approaches it differently. They don't have media backgrounds. So you get a lot of disparate ways of approaching metrics, transparency, attribution windows look different across multiple programs. And so it's really key to look for ways like partnering with the IAB Europe, and in the US, similarly, they've just done a measurement and buying guide. And so those are ways that I think we can see retail media starting to become more mature. And what we really see is, and I love that Cecile mentioned things like offline measurement. We've been able to bring in-store sales for about 4 years now, and starting to stitch together true deterministic attribution to provide that transparency is so key. Because if you don't know what you're measuring, if you don't know those business rules, if you don't know what the windows are and how they compare to the other 4 or 5 channels that are driving, say, that same sale on that retailer, it becomes really difficult to say, is that a valuable dollar that I've just spent in advertising? So I would encourage any advertisers or marketers on the call here to think about what are ways you can push for and demand that the programs you work with as an advertising and media partner are starting to provide at least that transparency. I think that's where we're going to start. Ultimately, there will become that more mature set of standards that people adhere to. But I think we'll see transparency come first. Cecile mentioned programmatic, and it's the same evolution that they went through. And so we're seeing now that retailers are just getting into the business, they're standing up new programs, and it's going to be driven, I think, by the industry folks like Chloe and the IAB to provide some expectation that there's got to at least be transparency first. With transparency will come that trust. And then I think you can allow marketers and advertisers to make smart decisions. How do you optimize? Where is that truly incremental dollar? And without that, you're going to see investment pull back. Retail media has seen this tremendous growth, but if you can't prove those are valuable spent dollars, those dollars are going to run out. And so I think one of the things we really focus on is providing that full transparency. We've had real-time metrics from the very beginning. Cecile keeps making great points around how like you've got to be able to measure so you can optimize, and it's got to be real time. If you get a wrap-up report a month later, what are you going to do with that information? Except, maybe next quarter you'll have something different. But I think that's something where, we're looking to partner with as many of the advertisers and specifically the industry groups like IAB to help push for that. It's an education process too. So we do a lot of that for our retail partners and say, this is what a media business looks like. We can help you stand that up. But becoming a media business fundamentally is different than being, in retail. And so it's an evolution. It's going to take a little bit of time, and, we're on that journey.
Thanks, Nate. I think we just run out of time. Just for the audience, the IAB Europe guide that Nate just mentioned is on the IAB Europe website, and it's available. Thank you, everyone. It was a great panel. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Sandra. Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks very much, Alexandra. A great session, a great conversation. Thank you to Alexandra, David, Chloe, Cecile, and Nate. Always love to hear people talking about standards. It's what we love here at IAB Europe. So yeah, an excellent conversation. A great look into AI and retail media. And thank you to all our panelists for joining us. We can guarantee there'll be many more conversations taking place about these two hot topics in the coming weeks, months, and years, I'm sure. Okay, right, on to our final discussion of the day. And have we been saving the best till last? Well, obviously, I obviously feel so. My colleague Francis is on this call, and we've fittingly worn matching striped t-shirts today, but I will remain impartial as I'm here in an IAB Europe capacity. The reason that we save this session for last is because whilst we talk about new developments and innovations, it's so important that we do regular check-ins with the industry to see what's actually being done. Are we making progress? Are we succeeding in building brand safe environments for stakeholders? And most importantly, for the people that use the platforms. So to see if we are, and to shed some light on transparency and industry best practice, I'm delighted to introduce our moderator, Sabara Rhodes, who is the Strategic Enterprise Account Executive from IAS. Welcome, Sarah, and over to you for the final session.
Thank you, Ryan. Hi, everyone. My name is Sabara Rhodes. I am, as Ryan mentioned, a Strategic Enterprise Account Executive at Integral Ad Science. For those of you who don't know much about Integral Ad Science, we are a leading global media measurement and optimization platform, and our mission is to be the global benchmark for trust and transparency in digital media quality. So personally, I work with global brands daily to help them navigate reputational risk across the digital ecosystem. And I have been at IAS for over 8 years. And as I'm sure you can imagine, over that time, I've seen the evolution of brand safety due to the ever-changing digital media landscape, and also the booming content growth that we've seen as an industry. So that in turn has seen marketers increasingly invested in protecting their brand's reputation and allocating media budgets towards content that minimizes the risk to their brand. And today I am joined by a great panel of experts, and we're going to be discussing some of the insights from the IAB's latest brand safety survey that looked at advertising industry expert views as to how brand safety was tackled last year and determine what still needs to happen going forward. So some of the key highlights of that study were that 67% of respondents agreed that brand safety was a key priority for the industry last year. Other priorities were privacy concerns, transparency, and sustainability. 53% of respondents agreed that the industry has done a good job of tackling brand safety over the past 12 months. And 71% cited that technology innovations helped solve brand safety concerns, and that was up from 65% in 2019. So let's welcome our panelists today. Can I ask that you all introduce yourselves and tell us what brand safety and suitability means to you and your organisation? Alex, can we start with you?
Sure. Thank you, Sabah. So hello, everyone. I'm Alex, and I lead Group M's brand safety work, primarily focused across EMEA. This essentially involves kind of working with our brands, our partners, our platforms, and kind of everywhere in between to kind of mitigate digital risk and kind of address brand and user safety in digital media. for Group M and for our clients, I think there's quite an important distinction between brand safety and brand suitability and how these are approached. We kind of define brand safety as content that's sort of not fit for monetization or inappropriate for advertising, but also content that no brand would feel comfortable being adjacent to or kind of funding. This is kind of the core responsibility of the work that we do in the brand safety team. Brand suitability is kind of a build on this, I suppose, and is about kind of balancing reach and protection, but tailoring it to your kind of brand's own unique requirements or values or potential nuances and sensitivities. So I guess to summarize it, brand safety is kind of not specific to a certain brand, but brand suitability will differ brand to brand. So I guess you can kind of view brand safety as the foundation, and brand suitability is sort of built on top to kind of make sure that every brand appears in a contextual environment that is appropriate to them. What we have seen, which is really, really valuable, is the kind of growing industry collaboration. I always struggle with that word. That kind of standardizing this approach, and by that I mean GARM, the Global Alliance of Responsible Media, who obviously amongst kind of various other focuses have kind of really helped to provide those common definitions of kind of what brand safety and suitability look like, so which really kind of helps brands and us and platforms and so on to kind of leverage that. So we're kind of all singing off the same hymn sheet, I suppose. And yeah, this is really, really kind of important, not only to maximize kind of protection of potential content that might not be safe or suitable, but also for ensuring kind of minimized wastage and efficiency as well.
Thanks, Alex. Amber.
Great. I would second everything Alex said for the difference between brand safety and suitability and how we define it. I'm a product manager at Triton Digital, and we are a global company operating in about 86 different countries. We're focused on the supply side advertising technology space, and our goal is to really help publishers monetize their audio inventory. So when we talk about brand safety and suitability, we're really talking about advertising in the podcasting space. We have advertising available for on-demand and radio, but radio, which is really an extension of on-demand, is very regulated. It's FCC regulated. There's a lot of elements already in place to control some of the brand safety and suitability levers, whereas podcast is anyone with a microphone and computer can have a podcast. And so I like to think of podcast advertising as very similar to influencer marketing. There's a lot of benefits and challenges and parallels between podcast advertising and influencer marketing. But when it comes to brand safety and suitability, this is where we're seeing a lot of publishers lean into to make podcasting more attractive to their advertisers. So again, exactly what Alex said, for brand safety, it's very fixed categories. No brand wants to be associated with it. I think these two categories get very conflated, especially by buyers. So it's important to differentiate between the brand safety piece and the brand suitability piece. We're seeing more publishers and brands lean into the brand suitability elements of advertising, just because brand suitability is much more subjective to the actual brand. And you can do a lot of things to really tailor the content and bundle inventory to align with what the brand is trying to achieve and target when it comes to podcast advertising.
Thanks, Amber. Francis?
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. I'm Francis. I'm head of brand safety for TikTok and focus on Europe. And what that means is educating the industry and people like Alex and Group M on the work that TikTok's doing on brand safety and suitability. And Amber and Alex said it all, really. The difference between safety and suitability is there. For TikTok, it's video, it's sound, it's comments, it's text, it's accounts, it's everything that we look at to best label to be able to offer the controls when it comes to suitability and safety. But if we think holistically, it kind of should go further than that in terms of platform integrity. And so when things like, topics around misinformation and hate speech, like what are we doing in areas like that and how are we overcoming them to offer people that really nice experience, which then falls into safety and suitability.
Thank you, Francis. Sarah? Hi, thanks, Saba. First off, as I was saying, I'm thrilled to be part of such a great panel of people, and you've already covered, I think, pretty much everything that falls under brand safety and suitability. So my name's Sarah Bouquet. I'm the head of safety and integrity solutions marketing at Meta. So I think there's just a small nuance for us at Meta. When we're thinking about brand safety, we really see it the same as people safety. So we believe when we can create an environment that's safe for people, by default, that same environment should also be safe for brands as well. Alex mentioned all the great work that GARM's done around standardizing frameworks across the industry, both around the brand safety floor as well as brand suitability frameworks, to make sure that there's common language, definitions, and understanding, so that from an advertiser or an agency point of view, it's really clear to understand how those things apply broadly across the industry as well. For us, when we're thinking about suitability, we understand that just because we are allowing content on our platforms, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's suitable for monetization. So we do have some different policies that we have there on that side, just to make sure that we're setting the right threshold for suitability too, and making sure that we have the right tools and reporting so that advertisers can set, the word unique has come up a lot, but like around their unique preferences or requirements that they have for their own brands. Thank you, Sarah. I mean, certainly for us from a verification perspective as well, you can tell, obviously, the ecosystem's fragmented, but as you've all said, we're trying to get to that consistent measurement, and GARM, et cetera, really helps there. Okay, so one of the key findings in the survey was that 67% of respondents agreed, or strongly agreed, that brand safety was still a key priority for the industry in 2022. So let's discuss why that was. Alex, can we start with you?
Sure. So I think, I mean, every year I think brings its challenges, but 2022 kind of particularly certainly brought, I suppose, new and new unique considerations for brand safety for us as an industry, but also there was kind of obviously broader societal challenges as well, which obviously have an impact on the work that we do in brand safety, whether that be kind of the kind of challenging current affairs or emerging platforms and technologies, or I suppose like the increasing levels of regulation such as the DSA and the impact that has as well. All of that basically means I think brand safety was sort of in the spotlight as much as ever, and I think rightly so. And I suppose the stat that you mentioned kind of is reflective of this, and kind of reflective of the kind of different conversations that we have as well with the industry. Also, I do think it highlights though that there's a kind of need for a continued focus in this space, particularly as we kind of operate in new and sometimes difficult spaces. And I don't think the need for this focus will sort of diminish or disappear anytime soon. And yeah, I think it would be interesting to kind of explore the 33% that kind of maybe don't see it as a priority as well. But no, that's kind of my thoughts on that.
Thanks, Alex. And you mentioned there obviously emerging channels and emerging platforms. So Amber, it'd be really interesting to hear your point of view on this.
Yeah, absolutely. So podcast is about 20 years old, so longer than I think some of us realize, but still in its infancy in a lot of ways, and we're still figuring this out. So I think when we talk about kind of the rise of brand safety being a really key focus in the podcast space, we have to kind of look at the history of podcast advertising. And that is, historically, ads were baked in directly to the episode. This made it really difficult to run large campaigns across multiple shows or by audience segments at scale. And publishers realized that shows were going vastly under-monetized and impressions were going unsold. So as an industry, we've kind of shifted to this more dynamic ad insertion world to help monetize and meet buyers' needs to get that scale that they're looking for. But that means buyers can no longer just shift through hours and hours of content and deem if a show qualifies. We really have to use data-driven insights such as AI and other things to contextually look at an episode and at scale see if that episode's aligned with the brand. So we've partnered with companies, and I think the industry is still figuring it out in a lot of ways, but some of the things that we've done is around contextual targeting. So utilizing a podcast transcript to analyze and pull out keywords, detect episode tone, and label content based on different categories. We're seeing this as a really great way to kind of increase that scale, but also meet buyers' needs of brand safety and suitability. An example of this would be historically Disney as a brand wouldn't want to, would kind of just exclude any sports genre in the podcast space. But now that we can do things like contextual targeting and brand suitability, we can do things like still include sports as a genre, but maybe exclude an ad from playing on any episode that mentions MMA or boxing. And so that's just the level of content and inventory bundling that we're moving towards to help align the need of brand safety and brand suitability.
Thanks, Amber. Yeah, I think for us from a advertiser's perspective as well, we're seeing like we're increasingly asked, and it's exactly about that, being able to scale brands safely across different platforms, taking suitability into account. So, you know, we're asked more and more about our emerging channels. As you say, audio's been around for a while, but in terms of brand suitability and brand safety, you know, what can we do in terms of capabilities and roadmap? And, you know, we introduce stuff like podcast level brand safety as new measurements. So we're constantly evolving as your spaces as well. Okay, Sarah, the first line of protection is the ability for a platform to moderate content that creates an environment for brands to be a part of, want to be a part of. Can you tell us more about how Meta are dealing with that as a challenge?
Yeah. So for us, I guess the first step is to explain we have our community standards and our community guidelines, which are across Facebook and Instagram, which is really that threshold around the sorts of content that we think has a space on our platforms. We work with external experts to make sure that these policies sit in the right place. So that includes NGOs, civil rights, human rights experts, as well as regulators, to really make sure that we have those baselines to make sure that we can have people engaging in safe environments. When it comes to ensuring that we can remove the content off our platforms that violates those standards, we use a mix of human review as well as AI to ensure that we can get it off as quickly as possible. And we also report out quarterly on how we're doing in that space. So we have our community standards enforcement report that we release each quarter, a quick plug that we released our most recent one earlier this month, which covers across Q2 of this year. So when we're looking at this, we really want people to understand the likelihood of coming across content that is within that threshold set by the GARM brand safety floor, which we talked about earlier on. We also understand, as we mentioned earlier, that each brand has their own unique preferences. So we also have tools, controls, and reporting to make sure that you can tailor for those preferences. Saba, you also touched on the importance of external verification and validation when we're putting reporting and those sorts of things out as well. So we're really proud that we have the MRC brand safety accreditation, and we're also tagged brand safety certified. With the MRC accreditation, we're currently going through a renewal for that as well for 2024 with expanded scope. And the other thing I think we've all touched on is like the importance of industry partnership and collaboration to really drive progress of the industry as a whole further forward, because we know that this area is constantly evolving and moving forward as well.
Thank you, Sarah. Obviously, AI and tech you've mentioned there plays a key role in what you're doing. And in the survey, technology was cited as one of the key things that's helping to solve brand safety concerns. From a verification perspective, on the open web, we've certainly seen this move away from legacy tools like keywords to more sophisticated tools like contextual page analysis, multimedia classification. Alex, it would be great to understand more about how tech is enabling your organization, so Group M, and building trust with your clients and partners.
Sure. So I think technology, and I suppose specifically how it kind of pertains to brand safety, has kind of advanced significantly in a couple of key areas over the past year or so. You've kind of touched on one of them, but it's kind of been really important for us is the advancement of the brand safety technology to kind of enable a shift away from what was sometimes kind of blunt tools for managing brand safety into that kind of really granular kind of content, page level, contextual and sentiment analysis. This has kind of really helped us to be able to understand what can sometimes be really subtle, but equally really important nuances across different types of content and context as well. This has kind of helped us to drive efficiencies and reduce wastage, but it also kind of has helped us to make sure that brand safety sort of tools and safeguards that are being in place don't negatively impact on kind of other areas of media responsibility, whether that's supporting kind of credible, responsible news journalism, or kind of reaching diverse groups and underrepresented audiences as well, just to kind of name two areas. And what's also important, and you mentioned it with the multimedia, is that this technology is available in as many environments as possible. Secondly, and we've heard a lot of this topic already today, so I won't talk about it for too long, but I think it's kind of clear how AI, and in particular generative AI technology, has some amazing applications, but there's also, it does kind of raise questions around content creation, copyright, misinformation, and these types of things. But what we are seeing is how this exact same technology already is and will kind of continue to be so critical in combating this challenge as well, kind of adding that much needed, I suppose, scalability and accuracy to the kind of content analysis and detection process that many platforms use today as well.
Thanks, Alex. And Francis, it would be great to hear from you in terms of what TikTok's doing, obviously with so much user-generated content, how technology plays a role there.
Yeah, and technology, it's really important, just because of the sheer volumes of content, tens of millions of videos posted every single day. You know, there's a huge element of like human moderation in that, but just to get through those volumes and identify content that shouldn't be on the platform, whether that content's monetizable and eligible for people's For You feeds, and then labeling it so people like Alex and other agencies can plan based on their suitability and safety needs. And I think people are getting comfortable with the efficacy of technology, and the majority of the stuff is labeled well, labeled accurately, and the number of brand safety, kind of like the adjacency issues that you used to hear a lot of, that's reducing in number. But, and I know actually IAS have like an amazing frame-by-frame analysis on suitability technology that you've been promoting this year, so it's really good. I think it's great. But I think there's always a human element that's still needed. And if you misinformation, like if you take the example of misinformation, it's completely different from other content issues, that in context and nuance, and Alex mentioned those two words, that it's really important to, and it's like the fact checking, especially on misinformation, is critical to consistently and accurately enforcing platform misinformation policy. So you do use technology. We use safety classifiers, deep learning models, decision engines to be able to classify and label content. But a lot of that work that technology has done is then passed on to humans to work with fact-checking partners, because what was misinformation this week might not have been misinformation that last week. But most importantly is that like technology is actually the end result, and technology improves because that's the human decision is training data, and that training data gets fed back into the models, and the models can be more accurate and improve and deal with those volumes that we do have. So, you know, I think the industry is getting very comfortable with the work that technology is doing, but there's still that gap in some content and context issues that humans have to play a part.
Yeah, interesting. I think, you know, there'll always be that human element to play as well. So finally, looking at what needs to happen in 2023 and beyond, to further tackle brand safety and ensure trust for advertisers and consumers, responses in the survey focused on creating new rules for new creators, safeguarding customer privacy, and more verification and content control. So to wrap up today's session, it would be really good to hear from each of you to tell me what question we should be asking, advertisers and planners should be asking to their advertising partners to better prepare for the future. Francis, shall we start with you?
Sure. I think all of customer privacy, more verification, content control, all important. For TikTok, our number one focus is safeguarding customer privacy, especially Cyber Europe, and we're in Europe and focusing on privacy in Europe. And it's a challenge the industry faces. There's more and more scrutiny on the industry, but there's in particular a lot of scrutiny on TikTok when it comes to privacy and security. And all platforms do collect data. It's whether that's to provide a better user experience, to serve advertising, to help recommend relevant content in people's feeds. But we have that responsibility to secure that European user data, that protected data, names, IP addresses, email addresses, and things like that. And I think there's going to be a continued focus and doubling down on what privacy is, and whether that's storing European user data locally within European Union, European Economic Area boundaries, whether that's creating security gateways to restrict access to user data, protected user data by the people within the company in other jurisdictions or other countries. And I think Sarah mentioned earlier, auditing, right? It's easy for me to come and say that, we say what we do, or we do what we say, but actually having somebody else verify that is really important. So I think for me, privacy is going to be the focus next year.
Thank you, Francis. Sarah, it'd be great to hear your views following on from that.
Thank you. Massive +1 to everything that Francis said, particularly around privacy. I think across the industry, it's something all of us are concerned about. I'll talk about something slightly different though, just to keep some diversity on the panel and focus in on content control. So in the session before this, David touched on this theme, and I think we've talked about it today around trust being earned and not assumed. So when we can really be transparent, when we can come to common understanding across the industry and really progress things further forward, that's where we're going to see the greatest progress being made. It's around independent verification, it's around auditing, but it's also around things like sharing technologies and helping to advance the industry where we can. So at Meta, we open sourced a technology which is called HMA, which is the Hasher Matcher Actioner tool, which was not named by marketing clearly, but is around helping people who have smaller platforms or may not be able to invest the same amount in technology as what we can, to be able to do the same sorts of AI, take down content across their platforms. We're one of the founding members through NECMEC, which is a National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children, for the partnership of Take It Down, which is helping people under 18 take back control of intimate images that may have been shared without their consent across platforms as well. And we're also a chair of GIFCT, which is the Global Internet Forum for Counterterrorism. Lots of long acronyms there, but it's really through these different initiatives, when we collectively come together and collaborate, that we can really see great change being driven forward across the industry, particularly as we're thinking about the safety side of things. And it's really, as Francis mentioned, we need to demonstrate action, and we also need to make sure that all of us are being transparent and having open dialogue with the industry as a whole around the areas that we still have to make progress on to push things further forward. The question I would pose would be one, I guess it's twofold. One, have you actually set your unique brand suitability preferences? And if you have, part 1B would be, when was the last time you reviewed them? So when it comes to brand suitability, this shouldn't be set and forget. You should be really reviewing these at a regular cadence to make sure that as your brand evolves, as the environment and the landscape that you're operating within is changing as well, that you're really reflecting the current values, principles, and appropriate ways to show up across the different platforms that you may be advertising across.
Thank you, Sarah. Amber?
Great. So I would say we're still evolving around this as we look at 2023 and really 2024, as this year is wrapping up really quickly. But our ultimate goal will always be to support our publishers' liquidity in the market, which means creating new and unique methods to bundle inventory to meet these buyers' demands around brand safety and suitability. And looking ahead, we're really looking at two key areas. The first one being reducing friction for publishers to measure and target their inventory. I heard a little bit of the last panel talk a lot about measurement and the importance of that. And that's something that's really important for us to focus on as we talk to other different data providers that specialize in measuring media quality. We've talked to companies like NewsGuard, which focuses on misinformation monitors, Sonnet, which is another audio data solution that does things like smart ad markers, which is really interesting when we think about hyper-specific content alignment. So the first one is really the data piece and making sure publishers can analyze their inventory in that way. And then the second one is we're getting a lot of interest around the programmatic space to offer brand safety and suitability. So really thinking about how we extend this to the programmatic offering. We see brand safety becoming potentially the next IVT in the programmatic space. So just like IVT, ensuring brand safety will become kind of like expected for all content in that space. And then how do we leverage suitability and contextual targeting in like an open PMP marketplace? That's kind of the big questions that we're asking ourselves as we move forward. And then for the second part of your question around what the question I would pose to the advertisers and planners, I've talked a lot about like bundling inventory and what that looks like, but I would actually pose the question and just ask about their creative production strategy. You can bundle your inventory all you want and contextual target, but if, especially in podcast, if the actual creative content doesn't align with the podcast content, it can be really jarring and a bit of a style clash. And with all the tools available out there for DCO and AI generated ads, it's good to think about message blending when it comes to podcast advertising. I have a history in radio where you just try to be as loud as possible, but with podcast, it's really important to match the style of the show because you do already have a very engaged audience. So coupling kind of the creative production strategy with your contextual suitability strategy, I think will lead to kind of the ultimate advertising plan.
Thank you, Amber. Alex.
Thank you. So yeah, I mean, it's great because I completely agree with what everyone's been saying. And I think particularly on the point around, I guess from our point of view as well, is leaning in on actually creating what your brand suitability approach looks like. It's kind of easy to say, but maybe harder to actually kind of do. So really leaning in on that space. I think, and I'll be brief in the sense that I think it's always important to kind of be looking at kind of what's coming next and emerging technologies and so on. But I would just say, and I suppose a question to ask would be, as we're kind of exploring these areas and different channels, push your partners to make sure you maintain the kind of core components or core tenets of what safety and transparency kind of really come down to. And I suppose in their very simplest form, it's about control on where your ad appears. It's around transparency and measurement into where your ad appears. And then it's around the kind of verification and I suppose independent accreditation across all of these environments as well. So yeah, as exciting as it is when we move into these new spaces, it's always important to make sure that there's continued focus on those areas.
Thank you, everyone. I'm conscious we're over time, but it was great to hear all your views. And it's clear that brand safety and suitability is a responsibility for all of us. And clearly collaboration is what's going to get us to that consistent measurement. So thank you all.
Thank you.
A big thank you. Thank you, Sabah, and to the panelists, Amber, Alex, Sarah, and Francis. Thank you so much for all your insights, your valuable knowledge. And you've definitely given myself and I'm sure the audience a lot to think about. So thank you very much. Okay, well, we are just about at the end of this event. And so I'm delighted you were able to join us today. And thank you very much for doing so. And we really appreciate you taking the time out of your day. And I hope you found it as valuable as I certainly did. I'd like to thank all of our panelists and moderators for giving up their time and sharing their knowledge and views on the I think I've just got kicked off.
We've got you back, Ryan. We've got you back.
Well, yeah, just saying thank you very much to all our panelists and moderators for giving up their time and sharing their knowledge and views of the important topics today that were debated. And as I mentioned, the event recording will be available through the IAB Europe website in the next couple of days. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning, all of our speakers are IAB Europe members. So if you're keen to become a member and participate in any future events, please do get in contact with our events team. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.